this video was shown to me by a friend. He said it was really good and brought up some interesting thoughts for him and wanted me to react to it, so I'm doing so. Also, this is my first time on Ratataskr's channel. This is his video. It's called Why Are Monster Hunter Fans So Divided? And we may watch another video of his or more, because I did see this here. Remnant 2 is the best co-op Souls-like, and I have to agree. I have to agree, and I would be curious to see what he says about that. But that's for another time. Right now, let's focus on this video. Let me just get it gigantic here for us. There we go. Perfect. We don't need the music now. Let's see what he has to say. Oh, whoops, it's muted. Hold on, guys. Hold on. There we go.
In every community that I've participated in, there's always a sizable division between the fans. These divisions are caused, usually, by the developer. They will release a game in a series that is significantly different than the ones that came before. Some fans will like the change, some fans will not like the change, and some will have mixed feelings. These fans will then congregate into different groups that champion different opinions of what the future of the series should look like. Now, in the Monster Hunter community, it is often the case that Monster Hunter fans don't agree with each other on what the next title should look like. In fact, I think that the Monster Hunter community has many more divisions than
I've heard this.
Typical. There's the realism and speculative evolution people, the veteran pre-Monster Hunter World fans versus the people that started in World or Rise. And surprisingly, the biggest and probably most antagonistic groups are the Monster Hunter World fans versus...
So because this is a reaction, guys, I want you to know I will be pausing at times to discuss points that he is making, and that he reminded me there of I should give my point of view here as well, actually. And it's that I started really with Monster Hunter World. I had been shown the game by other friends at points, and it just never clicked, right? I just didn't quite get it. And then World came out, and I finally fully dived into it, and I just fell in love with Monster Hunter in general. I'll wait to give points on where I think the game should go until I hear more of what this discussion is bringing from what he wants to
the Monster Hunter
about.
Rise fans, despite the fact that they both come from the same generation. Although the gameplay loop remains mostly the same for all Monster Hunter titles, the experimentation between titles created specific gimmicks and aesthetic differences that spawned different interpretations on what the game's direction should be. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about what the different groups are, what they want out of Monster Hunter, and what caused these divisions in the first place. In order to fully understand the different groups in the community, and why there is such a range of expectations from the fans on what the next title should look like, we first have to look at Monster Hunter's design philosophy, and how the team at Capcom develops their games. Early in the development of the original Monster Hunter, Capcom shifted from a typical fantasy setting into a more grounded setting, a setting that had fantastical elements, but that also had ecologically conscious explanations for those elements.
Yeah, I like
in
that
Monster
about
Hunter
Monster
Illustrations
Hunter,
1.
That's what I liked about World.
There are interviews with the development team that discuss this shift in development. The following is a quote from the director. "We had it in our heads that this was going to be a fantasy game, so our ideas tended to gear towards magic and the like. The world as a whole was much more fantastical as well. I doubt any of us expected it to turn out so analog." The lead designer had this to say.
Analog?
When we got down to the nitty-gritty of what kind of game is Monster Hunter going to be, really, that's when we dropped the whole magic system. One of the earliest concept movies we created showed a few hunters laying traps and luring a monster to their traps. In those movies, the monsters were always very generic fantasy monsters, like red dragons. Not only were they archetypal dragons, we also had them climbing out of the depths of ancient ruins, where they had no doubt been napping on a huge treasure hoard, so the game itself didn't have a strong connection to nature at first. So, Monster Hunter, early in its development, made a choice to lean away from the generic fantasy they had been working with. This shift in development would become their greatest asset, and make the Monster Hunter game world that we know today. This unique setting allows Monster Hunter to stand out next to other fantasy game worlds. Looking into
So I would, oh, I
the
don't want to look at
designs
the
of the
handler. Hold
monsters
on.
in the series, we can see that the developers deliberately chose designs that made practical sense in a simulated ecological setting. Quote, "Every monster has a bunch of ideas incorporated into each part of its design, in order to give the player a better sense of how it lives within the game world. For instance, the hard-looking skin on a Lagambi's arms was designed to help it brake and change course while gliding."
Yeah, okay, so this point I think is really crucial as to why I think Monster Hunter in general has had such a, even a cult following prior to World's release, and then once World came out, they went, it feels like they really went full in on this concept right here in terms of everything. And by that I mean like the little details on every monster and it making sense logically why the monster looks like that. For example, a different one would be Anjanath, and I heard this explanation when World was being talked about a lot back when it was first released. Um, and I liked the explanations that they had for things. Like, for example, the back fins on Anjanath, like they let out heat when he's expelling his fire, and it makes sense in that way. I mean, it's still fantastical, don't get me wrong, but it makes it more grounded in a reality. Like, oh, okay, so this is how it works. Even Valstrax, he has jet engine chest pieces, and that allows him to like pull in air and then like expel it, I guess, to go really fast. I can't remember the exact workings of Valstrax, but I know it's something like that, and that's why there's all the holes on him. It's just very interesting that each monster has so much detail in them that but it still makes sense to a degree. I feel like there's some examples where obviously the monster is just really fantastical. Funnily enough, I feel like Fatalis is actually not an example of this. I feel Fatalis's moveset is still, it really makes sense, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it's very fantastical in the way that like, oh wow, this thing is like casting magic. I would say Namiel or even Lunastra are actually more in that line, or Velkhana with the ice moves. I always like to think of Velkhana as like a weird ice mage dragon because it's basically just casting ice magic at us constantly, especially AT Velkhana. Oh, I fucking hate that thing. Alright, sorry, we'll get back to the video.
In addition to being resistant to damage, it would make me happy if players had fun wondering why the monster's various parts are designed the way they are while actually playing the game. So, as you can see, the monsters are designed to attempt to be realistic. The developers are trying to take their natural environment into account, and how that environment might have fueled their evolution. This focus on speculative evolution was always a priority.
Right there.
You can see in this artwork that they were always trying to make a unified
hold on. Okay, this variant, okay, let's see. Shelled lizard was able to survive better than most by protecting itself with its hard shell. Okay. This variant is best suited for flight. These variants help develop unique physical features to keep themselves safe. Ears. Hard shell variants, these guys develop their shells to the point where they don't even need them to fly, since most things cannot harm them. Oh, and then there's like a Diablos. This variant adapted to a region with little to no predators. It barely resembles its prior form and mainly feeds on rotting flesh. Ugh. Gross. The weakest of the shelled lizards evolved into this form as they were unable to hunt for themselves and resorted to feeding on rotting carcasses. Damn! Oh, that's funny. Picking on, that's so cool. Okay, so then we got the ancient fish. Leads to, oh man. The above are wyverns. Okay, so what are these? These are not technically wyverns, but they are evolved into similar form as the wyverns. In the world of Monster Hunter, the form of a wyvern offers the best chance of survival. Claw Raptor, Claw Wyvern. Oh, is this like an early design of Tigrex and maybe like the ideas of Barioth and stuff and Nargacuga? I bet. Oh, so interesting. And Raptor here. Okay. This one looks like a shark. That's so cool. Like a shark Tigrex. That sounds terrifying. Oh my god. Make it really big with lots of teeth. Oh man, I love when we get to see stuff like this. This is so cool.
Family tree. where most wyverns evolved from a shelled lizard ancestor
Oh shit, he's
that
gone through
adapted
it.
to
Fuck.
various different environments and became those wyverns over time. Now,
Love
this
it.
is probably not canon, or
this
is
is
at
why
least no
Monster Hunter's
longer
great.
canon.
Well, of
But
course
the point
not.
is,
This is just
they
like an idea,
wanted
a
things to make
concept.
sense. They were trying to have reasons for why the monsters were the way they were. The following is a staff comment for the Monster Hunter
I'm so
illustration
glad they
1.
went in that direction.
Even
with
those
their
who
design.
do not draw have a set of preconceived notions regarding how a given creature moves. That's why we can't really fudge any major
Exactly.
point with regards of a monster's physical structure and movements.
Your brain
If we do,
knows
the
how to
players are more
process
likely to reject the reality
realistic
of the monster in
movements
question.
automatically. It's trained
That's
to
why
do
we spend
that.
a lot of time not only on the skeletal structure, but also the meat and skin that we put on any given monster. It can be pretty difficult to try and imagine how the skin should hang off of a certain fictional creature, but as I look
wonder when
back
they
through
made
the
this
illustrations
statement.
for the game, I can see how we improved as we went along, and that makes me happy. So here they admit
I
that
would
they
say
were
so.
trying to make the monster move in a realistic way, that both its appearance and its movement were a priority, and they wanted to avoid the player.
Well, yeah, like Kuluyaku, you can read his moves. You know what he's doing. I mean, he's digging up a rock, or he's looking at you, about to peck you. I mean, there's so many things you can tell, even from sound, too. Sound cues. Every little thing they've done has made this thing just better in general. I don't know. I played GU
Rejecting
as
the
an older
reality
one.
of the monster in question. One of the best
And I think
things
they're
about
all just
Monster
so
Hunter
good.
is how it's not just visual and flavor text. These design choices often have gameplay implications. Like the Lagambi's arms, they're more resistant to damage
let me get
because
rid of
they
that
were
guy,
designed
sorry.
to help it stop and change directions while sliding on the ice. Another example that
is it?
shows that they care about this even recently is Zitsuyaku. The following is a quote by Fujioka. "We wanted Zitsuyaku to be a grounded monster. That goes for its flash, too, which is different from past iterations, because it doesn't affect the whole field. We made it possible for the player to identify safe areas, because the zone in front of the ear flap lights up while everything behind the monster is safe. We added shells to its nest to increase the flash's effect.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a challenge on its home turf." I really like this detail. Zitsuyaku has a inherent inclination
And the first time I
to
saw the
collect
move, you knew how to
reflective
dodge
shells that increases the potency of its natural
Even if you
weapon
got hit by it that first
when
time,
having to
like
defend
you
its
saw
home
how
turf.
it worked.
And this is an
And it made
adaptation that
sense. So you're just like,
translates
oh,
into
okay, I need to
the
get behind
environment
him.
and the gameplay. Hirochika Nagaki in the Monster Hunter Illustrations 2 says,
This is why I like you can
"For the
turn off
Monster
the
Hunter
UI.
titles, I try to capture a sense of living creatures in the designs. That's the theme I follow. I take into consideration not just the thought of making them look cool, but also their dignity as wild creatures, and elements that would facilitate play as a game."
Oh,
To many
man.
players, this aspect of the game is so critical
These
that it
developers
should
are
be kept
fucking
consistent and at the
geniuses.
forefront at all times.
Oh, I'm
Using
so
Barroth as an
excited
example,
for Wilds.
That monster was designed entirely around its relationship with the environment. It uses the murky, muddy waters to hide from other creatures, but it also uses the mud to protect itself from the heat of the sun. Capcom even went out of their way to provide a pre-rendered cutscene of Barroth's behaviors outside of the limitations of their in-game engine. In the Barroth
Fair
ecology
enough.
video, we can see the developer's vision of this fictional animal. And these concepts translate into gameplay. The behaviors that assist Barroth in survival suddenly become combat gimmicks in the player's battle against the monster. The mud isn't just a fancy visual in a cutscene, and it's not just flavor text in a description. It's integrated into the fight. It coats the Barroth in a protective layer. He slings it around at the hunter to inconvenience him. Quote, "For Barroth's design, I thought of a bulldozer clearing away sand and dirt, and combined it with the motif of a caterpillar's carapace. It was decided that this creature lives in bogs, so I figured that it would approach its prey covered in dirt and mud to hide its body. That's when I put the nostrils on the top of its head so that it could still breathe even when submerged in mud." So, the point is, Monster Hunter has always cared about realism in their designs. They want the monster designs to reflect its relationship with its environment, and if possible for that relationship
Biggest
to be
strength.
expressed even in the gameplay, even in the hunt itself. However, Monster Hunter is also not afraid of adding some monsters that aren't grounded in reality at all.
Well, yeah.
In fact, this is a deliberate part of the design process. When asked about the inclusion of blatantly fantastical monsters next to the more grounded ones, Kaname had this to say.
Like a Latrion.
"When you create
oh
a
my
world
God.
full of mythical creatures like the Kirin, the entire world starts
Or
to feel
Kirin,
like
yeah.
a very fantastical place with no basis in reality. Our focus for the world of Monster Hunter was to create a place that would feel like it could be real. By tossing in a decidedly fantasy-themed creature into this realistic world, it made
So
the
interesting.
Kirin stand out in the player's eyes, and we hope that such an unexpected surprise will make the world a more exciting place for them to explore.
And I have to say, like, so my first time fighting Kieran was like, what the because I saw it and I was like, a unicorn? What? And then I got struck by lightning and died. And it was like, what? Fucking god damn it, Kieran. Oh man. But it made me want to pursue even further, because I feel like you see the first Kieran. Is it or do you see Kieran in high rank? I can't remember when you first see it, but I remember my first time finding that creature and I was like, what the hell is this game? Because I was just, you fight like Rathians, Rathalos, Diablos, then you see Kieran, and it just keeps getting more and more of that scaling, it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher in terms of like the fantastical nature of the game. But it starts you off so grounded. It allows you to get ready for that, I feel like, because I mean there are some walls like Nergigante was such a wall for me at first. Now he's like one of my favorite and easiest hunts to do. Even Ruiner isn't that. He can hurt, but as long as you're moving and not getting hit by the bleed, you're usually fine. You can still clip you though. But yeah, I think this is one of their biggest strengths, is the fact that they decided to focus on this, I don't know, contrasting concepts like the grittiness of the mundane world. And this is why I think World was so beloved in the West, is it allowed them to enter this world that felt real while it gradually became more fantastical as they became more attuned with playing the game and experiencing the world they had built. I think that's one reason why World was it just exploded Monster Hunter.
That's why we made the decision to include creatures like Kieran. In a different staff comment, he says, "With Monster Hunter 2, we intentionally tried going with a more fantastical feel to our designs, and added new ancient dragon types. We also hoped that this new infusion of ancient dragon monsters would help make existing monsters like Rathian and Rathalos seem more realistic as far as this world was concerned." So, the purpose of Elder Dragons and other less realistic creatures is to provide a contrast. Their inclusion into a mundane world makes that world seem even more realistic in comparison. The Elder Dragon's fantastical nature is reflected even in the game's lore. To the characters, these archetypal fantasy dragons are so unusual that they can't be categorized as normal monsters.
Yeah, Elder Dragons.
Now, in a different quote, Kaname says, "Still, we did manage to put together the feline and velociprey while we were working on the larger dragons. When you are dealing with nature and the creation of a natural environment, you can't help but fill the empty spaces with smaller critters. You can't create a full, vibrant world with just a bunch of boss."
Yes, the endemic life in World was also another big feature that I'm pretty sure for a fact almost everyone, at least everyone who likes World, and even maybe still likes the older games more, but I think everyone likes the endemic life system, where you capture like the little pets and there's all sorts of like little creatures roaming the different environments. I think that is incredible. I really miss that in Rise. I was hoping it would be in Rise, to be honest, because I really like capturing the pets. It just added even more to the depth of the world, and plus you get to put them out in your room and have them be really adorable. So I mean,
It's monsters. So it's clear that developers had always intended for these monsters to function in a simulated ecosystem with each other. They wanted the world to feel as real as possible. That's why the monsters in Monster Hunter will eat, drink, sleep, and communicate to one another in ways real-life animals do. They aren't mindless evil monsters out to destroy humanity. They are deliberately crafted animals that live and prey on each other in a fictional ecosystem. And it isn't the case that this is just something that they used to care about and now no longer do. Because in Monster Hunter World, they doubled down on the simulated ecosystem angle, and the developers pushed to take that concept to a new level. In an interview for World, Sugimoto said the following:
"I love the Ancient Forest.
Once you decided on a new concept for the next title,
that's the point,
which in this case is a living, breathing ecosystem full of rich interactions between predator and prey monsters and little creatures. The hunters are jumping into this world, but even without you, it's kind of getting on with its own business being a realistic ecosystem." Now, for the speculative ecology fans, this is the heart of Monster Hunter. This is what differentiates it from its peers. They hyperfixate on these aspects, and they object when a monster design strays too far from that ideal and becomes unrealistic. And so they tend to butt heads with players that don't care at all about that and are just in Monster Hunter for the fun gameplay. After all, it doesn't matter how a Baroth's body or habits work within the...
I think that's kind of dumb, because I feel like everyone's going to enjoy it a different way. And I think at the end of the day, we shouldn't police how we enjoy the game. I guess it would differentiate how you would want the next game to really follow. But I would say they only, like, the players who want just to go hunt in the combat and do that, I don't think they lose anything by the increased focus on the ecology and the ecosystem and all of the little details that they put in, like in World, that may be lacking in Rise or even older games, or like the side games, not the mainline games. I don't know. I think that's the main thing, though, is I just don't see... Yeah, we'll just see what he says.
The context of a video game, where the objective is to administer damage to the monster.
Yeah.
Even after all the work that went into making the ecosystems and world feel living and dynamic,
if you don't want to get involved in the story,
those aspects are mostly irrelevant when you're grinding the same monster a dozen times.
True.
The process of creating a fantastical animal is helpful in creating a unique creature design and combat experience, but the details of this process are not important to the player once they're actually playing the game. Or rather, noticing these details and caring about them is optional.
That's true, I guess. But I mean, I care
Let's
about
move
it.
on
I think
and
it's
talk
great
about the Monster Hunter
because it just
world
makes you
versus the
feel
Monster Hunter
better
Rise
about
fans.
killing it, in my opinion.
And to do
makes
that,
you
we
feel
need to
more
talk about the
satisfied
differences between mainline and portable Monster Hunter
when
games.
you beat a tough monster.
Luckily, what we've already discussed with the speculative evolution fans will be useful because these groups tend to overlap in some places.
But I
in
like
broad
Rise
strokes,
too, actually.
a mainline title is a numbered entry. Monster Hunter 1, 2, 3, 4, and Monster Hunter World. We know that Monster Hunter World is Monster Hunter 5 because it was confirmed by Ryozo Tsujimoto. And he also explains that they changed the naming convention because they didn't want people to see Monster Hunter 5 and think, well, do I have to play the other 4? What if I'm lost? It was to prevent new players from being discouraged.
Oh, that was
smart. But though they've dropped the numbering, the system hasn't gone away. They still release a mainline game and a portable
don't show
game,
me this. I want to play
and you
Wild
can determine which is a mainline title by counting the number of dragon heads in the logo. Because Monster Hunter Wilds has 6 serpent heads in the logo, it is Monster Hunter 6. And as further evidence, a while ago there was a leak in Capcom.
So much fun.
That leak revealed that internally they're still using the numbered naming conventions for Monster Hunter 6. Now, I mention this because the mainline and portable games have distinct qualities.
Oh, Wilds is going to be so sick.
Typically, mainline titles put more focus on narrative storytelling, and by extension, the developers also focus more on world building and thus fantasy ecology. Portable titles are less concerned with that. They put more focus on the gameplay loop, experimenting with player actions and their dynamics with the monsters. They tend to be more experimental and disregard previously
Rise had a lot
established
of
norms.
other crazy shit
Mainline
going
titles
on
tend to have a more nuanced
way more
narrative,
fantastical and
focused on character dynamics and uncovering the mysteries of the ecological world. As for gameplay, the mainline titles tend to have slower, heavier, more methodical, more grounded combat. Portable titles tend to be flashier,
I think I do prefer
faster,
that.
more experimental. Maybe most critically,
but I do like some of the experimental
titles
stuff, like
try to
Generations
keep the ecological aspects in the forefront. It's incorporated into the overall art direction, and as a result, the art direction will appear more down to earth, more mundane, grittier. The portable titles are less interested in that. Both the characters and the locations will be louder and more expressive, and their monster designs are often less interested in adhering to the realism that Monster Hunter is known for. Now, these tendencies I'm describing are not absolute. The design direction of both the mainline and portable games will bleed into each other sometimes.
Oh, for sure, 100%.
And there are clear exceptions to all the things that I've said. But generally, it is the case that the games differ in the ways I've described. With all of this context,
agree with that.
It should be easy to see why there's so much online contention between fans on which direction the series should go. Radically different art direction and gameplay changes between releases will generate wildly different interpretations of what Monster Hunter is and what it should be. When Monster Hunter World released, it was and continues to be its best-selling game of all time. It jettisoned the series.
That's fucking wild. I mean, they make Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and Monster Hunter World bestseller of all time. I still think that's crazy.
Into the mainstream.
And it's only
It's no
doing good, right?
exaggeration
It's
to
doing
say that
real good right
most
now.
players were new
Which is
players that had
crazy.
never touched the series. People that had been with the
It still
series
looks
for a long
great. The
time and
game looks
understood this
fantastic.
difference between mainline and portable game were the minority. And so when
The
Monster Hunter Rise was
videos
released,
never do it
it
justice
appeared
on
as a
YouTube.
departure from everything World had set out
You
to
really
do.
need to play it if you want to see how
Even now, there
gorgeous
are
it is,
a
guys.
huge number
Rise
of Monster
doesn't
Hunter
look
World
bad either
fans
with the
that
PC high
actively
res
dislike
texture
Monster Hunter
update.
Rise.
I mean, it's nowhere
And even
near
if they didn't
World,
outright
but it was
dislike
designed for
Rise,
Switch. It's
they
a
certainly didn't
portable
want it going further
game,
into the Rise
essentially.
direction. They wanted the next Monster Hunter game after Rise to be more like Monster Hunter World.
Mm-hmm.
The real source of this conflict, I think, is that it
I'm in
wasn't
that
clear
camp, personally.
that Capcom and Monster Hunter would continue in this mainline portable
And it clearly
direction.
is.
The release of World began the 5th generation of Monster Hunter, and
Yep.
it changed so much so drastically that it made the future uncertain. There was a fear that Rise represented the permanent future of Monster Hunter as a whole, that the games would become much faster, less realistic, less interested in the monster ecology, more interested in rushing you from one fight to the next, and less interested in the preparation and hunting simulation aspect. Now that the trailer for Monster Hunter Wilds confirms that it is in fact Monster Hunter 6, and that they are going to keep the mainline portable distinction, I
Hell
suspect
yeah.
that the World and Rise fans
Look
will
at
have
that gray
less to
sword on
be
his back. I
antagonistic
want to
over.
use it.
Alright, finally, the last group is the old Monster Hunter fans, the
This
veteran
is what
fans,
part I'm curious about.
versus the new fans, which they consider to be people that started in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter has been around for 20 years, and there's a vocal minority of veterans that are upset by the overall changes in the game's development since the earlier entries. Older fans have been clamoring for a return to form for a long time, and their group tends to overlap with the mainline fans and the speculative ecology fans. The veteran fans that I'm describing aren't just anybody that likes the old games. It's specifically the people that like the old games and don't like the new ones. They believe that too much of the old design was abandoned with Monster Hunter World, and Rise just exacerbated the problem. They weren't satisfied with Monster Hunter World because they believe that the clunkier design choices of the earlier titles managed to enhance the hunting simulation experience. The technical limitations in the old games created specific art.
I'm mixed on that because I feel like some of these clunky design issues with older games, they may not have been completely intentional. They may have been like an issue with the programming or like just limitations of budget even. I mean, I think that's part of the issue I have with that is I feel World improved things in a way, exactly, limited technology that didn't allow for the innovation to occur that they wanted. Like before, when you drank potions, you would drink a potion and like have to flex after the potion is over. So you're standing still, drinking potion, then you flex. Which is crazy, but that's how it worked. And I don't know if that could have been just a limitation of tech or just how they intended it to be at the time. But now that you can move with potions in World, I wouldn't really want to go back in a new game to do it. Now, I've played GU, which has that system where you flex after healing, and also it's the old games, so it has more of those old systems, and it's still a great Monster Hunter game. Like I think they're all good personally. I like them all. They just have their own unique like gimmicks is how I would describe it. And it's more about just enjoying that Monster Hunter for what it is rather than I think trying to shoehorn it into what it should be, because I think we should allow for innovation in a game even if there are diehard fans of the old ones. And I think I would argue you should just go back and play the old ones then, because they're still really good. I've been considering maybe trying to figure out a way to play Monster Hunter 3 just to see what the underwater combat was like, because I've heard so many mixed opinions on it. But yeah, I think that's the main point there for me on that. It's just, yeah, let's see what he has to say.
Directions and gameplay design choices that have since been gentrified to keep up with what's considered standard for AAA titles. Players that played the first 4 generations will be fond of gameplay mechanics that are now considered outdated, sluggish, or confusing. They are unhappy with things like the changing or removal of the tracking systems, bug nets and pickaxes being streamlined, the removal of hot and cold drinks.
I understand to a point, but I feel like just because it takes longer doesn't necessarily make it better. Now, I don't want them to make monsters easier necessarily, but them making gathering faster doesn't waste my life as much then trying to get materials to do what I want to do. And I can prefer that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, the hot and cold drink thing specifically, I find to be interesting because I feel like I'm missing something in Rise when I don't have to drink one. Because in World, you still have to. So when you go to a hot zone, you need a cold drink, or if you're going to a cold zone, you need a hot drink. So vice versa, you know. Yeah, I liked it too. For some reason, I don't mind that one in particular. So I don't mind if they bring that back. For some reason, I thought it just added a little something extra that made it more realistic. It fed into that it fed into the ecosystem of realism that he's been talking about this whole time. So I do think certain things should stay, but them getting rid of like the bug nets, for example, and instead giving us the Slinger and World that had a capture net that let us capture endemic life, or you could just grab a bug, was way better. We don't need to have bug nets, pickaxes, and all these other gathering items like we used to. In GU, you had to have like actual pickaxes to gather things. And the pickaxes would break, so you would have to buy more. So it was just, you know, an older system, and I think the innovations here are a pretty good improvement for the most part. But I wouldn't mind if they brought back cold and hot drink. I think that was a little too far because I like the immersion it brought and the negatives of the cold and hot areas. I think that was important to me too, because it felt weird that I could just walk around in a cold zone just willy-nilly, I guess.
The ability to access your camp to manage your entire inventory after you've departed from a quest. They resent these changes being considered quality of life changes.
See, he has like 3 pickaxes right there. You can see it.
Quality of life changes. They see them as gameplay mechanics that incentivized careful preparation and play, which in turn complemented the monster hunting simulation. Their main complaint is that Monster Hunter strays further and further into a pure action game. And the more things are streamlined, the more they push you into going to the monster quickly, then the less room there is for the hunting simulation aspect, which these players value so highly. Monster Hunter's original tracking system involved either wandering around the map when you're new, or understanding the monster spawn locations when you're experienced, and then locating the monster and hitting it with a paintball. The paintball then tracks its position on the map.
Yeah,
in World, they replaced this system with the Scout Fly system,
in the old games,
which still required some level of tracking.
But I like this system more for a few different reasons. Now, I know some people absolutely despise Scout Flies. I think they find it confusing. I'm not sure personally why, though. So how it works is once you have enough tracks of a monster, you can then pin the monster, and the flies will just lead you to it. If you don't see any flies, it's probably because you're in combat. Once you exit combat... Well, I don't know. I think you just need to trust it. The thing is people forget that the monster is still moving regardless if you're near it or not. So the Scout Flies are trying to lead you there the quickest way possible that they can find. But if it like flies away to a different area, it's going to have to redirect you. So I think it's about knowing where the monster goes frequently, being able to just check the map quickly, seeing where it's flying to, knowing where it's going, and then just making your own track there eventually once you know enough about them. But that's what the tracks would help you do. And I do think collecting tracks is more immersion building than throwing a paintball at it. Personally. And see, like, the thing is also in World it's a little different, because once you have enough tracks, you can see them on the map, while in the older games, you only the only way to see them on the map was by marking them with a paintball, no matter what. So it was a little tougher in that sense, because if the paintball ran out, boom, they're gone, and you have to find the zone if you didn't see it.
But was much less demanding on...
Oh, and that's another thing I should mention. In the older games, at least in GU, if you don't have the map from the blue box at the beginning of a mission, you don't see all the zone locations. So unless you're familiar with the area, you won't see the zone.
On the player. In Rise, the tracking system was removed completely, and now the monsters are always visible on the map. The veteran players were upset with this change because it streamlines a massive part of the hunting process.
It does, because you
Similarly,
can always see
Monster
them on
Hunter
the
World
map.
introduced a base camp that lets you manage all of your items.
This,
along with the fast travel to these camps, grants players access to everything they've...
Well, and that was the thing in the older ones as well. When you go to camp, you don't have infinite potions. You couldn't access your stash. You could only access maybe some extra potions that they gave you as a gift if you got to like a certain point in the hunt. So sometimes you're running around with like no potions, either looking for herbs and honey to craft more, or praying you can make it to a camp before you die, because you have no more potions left. It is a different way to hunt, because the damage is even different with the monsters, which I think is important to mention as well, because the damage in Monster Hunter World is really high, where like, you know, you've played it, like 1-2 hits, boom, dead. Especially later on with big monsters, you can just get knocked, man. And I think that can happen in the older games too, to a point, but the damage is much lower because you are limited on your potions, and they know that. So it's just designed differently, which would give the hunt a different feel. Like playing the older games, I've never felt so desperate because I was so low on potions, and I'm running around, running out of time, trying to heal and not die. It was very funny, but it's a very different feeling than World, because with World, you just go to camp, make more potions, or grab some out of the box, done.
They've ever collected, essentially giving them infinite healing, infinite potions, infinite of any material that they've farmed, and completely removes any of the tension you might have experienced by hunting a monster and noticing that you're running low on mega potions, because you can simply disengage and go get more.
Oh yeah, and like
they also appreciate
that was
the
a consumable
slower, more
too.
methodical combat found in the older titles.
You didn't have infinite,
and even how long it takes to heal, and how long you're stuck not being able to move while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Many of these old systems, like item management and tracking systems, slowed the game down and required the player to put extra care into all of their actions. They needed to be 100% sure they were ready to depart on the quest. The veteran players that enjoy these systems see them as part of the overall game experience that makes Monster Hunter what it is. Now, the interesting thing about this group is that it's not a monolith. Individuals in this group will overlap with the speculative ecology fans, the mainline fans, and even the Monster Hunter World fans. And they believe different things to different degrees. Some want a complete return to tradition, but some just want to get rid of the infinite camp restocks, and a more involved tracking system. Some want a general increase in difficulty, and for that difficulty to be scattered across the low rank and high rank, and not just centered around the endgame experience. Some want the combat to be slower, more methodical, less reliant on counters like Monster Hunter Rise. But many that want that don't necessarily want to go back to Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, they mean Monster Hunter World level of speed. There's even people like me who started in Monster Hunter World, but went back to the older titles and can see that they did in fact have things of value that could be maybe introduced into the newer games.
100%. 100%.
Older
Older games are really good.
That covers all of the different groups pretty well. My personal opinion is that we're in a very good place when it comes to how Capcom is running Monster Hunter.
Dude, look at him sniffing.
The fact that they're keeping the mainline and portable distinction, and that they're alternating releases between them, is a very good thing.
That's what makes the game good
to me. The biggest division right now in Monster Hunter is between the Monster Hunter World fans and the Monster Hunter Rise fans, and they also tend to be the most antagonistic to one another. Now that Monster Hunter Wilds is coming out, and it's obvious that it's going to be more like Monster Hunter World, just like the World fans hoped, they, and any fans that overlap with them, no longer need to be afraid that the franchise is moving in a direction that they didn't understand. I suspect that both the World and Rise fans will gain a new appreciation for each other's game now that they can treat the mainline and portable releases as palate cleansers. Instead of viewing them as existential threats, they'll see them as just a way to pass the time while they wait for the next Monster Hunter game of their preference. Anyway, that's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.
Okay, that was a really good video by Ratatoskr. You guys should go give him a follow, or subscribe rather, and a like.